Is LBC, leading Britain's conversation with Ian Collins. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Ian Collins on LBC.
Yes, good evening. It is LBC leading Britain's conversation. I'm Ian Collins, and tonight we're joined by Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe.
You know, we're sorry that a man died, regardless of the circumstances. The police officer, we're not here to shoot people or to hurt them, certainly not to kill them.
He is, of course, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police and Britain's top cop.
Regardless of someone's past, we ought to try and treat people reasonably professionally.
Yes. And tonight, he's taking your calls, 0345 6060 973.
Well, I'm worried that we could be close to breaking point if we do nothing, and we are clearly going to have to put a lot more officers into it.
That's Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe with us next. That is the number, of course, 0345 6060 973. We're taking your calls to Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe. He's the Metropolitan Police Commissioner in charge of over 30,000 police officers. He's joining us right off the back of a new TV show. It's called The Met, a series looking at the inner workings of life in the UK's biggest police force. Sir Bernard, welcome to Late Nights on LBC.
Ian, good evening.
Good to see you.
Thank you for the opportunity to come in and talk to some of your listeners.
Of course. It's a heck of a risk, though, isn't it, allowing an entire TV crew to follow your every move?
It was, and it still feels as though it is. We, at the time we made the decision, which was now probably about 2 years ago, there was quite a lot going on in the Met. We were under a lot of challenge, financially, operationally always. It was just after the Olympics. The organisation had gone through a lot of trauma around the senior team moving on. So for lots of reasons, there was some risk. But we had 3 different channels who wanted to interview us and have a documentary. We invited each of them to make a presentation. And the BBC had got the best presentation. They were going to do it for a long time. They came in for just over a year. They went right round the Met, and we only put 2 blocks on them. One was not to go into the Counter-Terrorist Command, and that was because of security. And the other one was not to go into routine diplomatic protection because of privacy of the principles involved there. But beyond that, they went where they wanted. You may have seen some press reports by journalists saying that it was very soft, this is a soft programme. Well, first of all, they haven't seen all 5, we have. And number 2 is that, we left the editor to decide what they wanted to view and what they broadcast. We didn't influence that, other than matter of fact.
We did have an email from Mike in Newark who says, I'm a cautious supporter of the police, but a complete cynic when it comes to the BBC. How can I be sure this programme isn't just a puff piece that's been produced to make Sir Bernard and the Met hierarchy look good in the wake of cuts and controversy?
Well, exactly what I've just said. We had no editorial control. The BBC were in for a year. We didn't say you could go here, you can't go here, you can't talk to that person. They set their plan out. They stuck with it for a year. I suspect, they're good journalists, so I suspect if they'd spotted something that was, false, if they'd spotted something we're trying to cover up, they would have found it. And yes, they showed us only a week ago, I think it was just over a week ago, they showed us the final cuts of the programme, and we could only comment on accuracy. Of course, if we're concerned about security of someone, we would mention that. And we had to, I think they've got one programme which they can't broadcast, but that's because of an issue, a legal issue, which they've been talking to the Crown Prosecution Service about, nothing to do with us at all. So if it's showing a good picture, perhaps we're not a bad organisation, perhaps we employ some really good officers, and perhaps this is a way of getting directly to the public with a view of policing in London, not mitigated and interpreted by journalists.
Did you feel you needed to do it in some kind of way? It comes, of course, at a tricky time for policing, particularly with the Met. 20% police cuts, more to come, the Mark Duggan killing, which is picked up in the programme, the subsequent riots still very fresh in people's minds. And on top of all of that, we read today your own police officers saying they don't have confidence in you or your senior team. That's not a particularly comfortable place to be for a commissioner.
Well, first of all, in terms of, do we need to do it? I wanted to do it. And I've always believed that policing should be open and accountable and transparent. This is one way of doing it. We're having the press in for a year, and now we're broadcasting, and we'll see what people think. We're equipping all our officers with body-worn videos, so by the end of this year, 20,000 officers will be carrying a camera around with them and being open. This is, for me, one of the critical things about policing. We're here to be held to account. We're held account through the courts to the law. We should be held account by the public, the 8.6 million people in London, and they pay our wages. They want to make sure that what we do is right. And I think the more we explain what we do, I hope the more they will support us.
So why are half of your officers unhappy with you?
I think it's not. I mean, first of all, we're one of the few organisations that do a staff survey. I don't know, does your organisation do one in?
I'm unaware of one at the moment.
I guess not many
I fear
do.
there might be one on the back
And
of this.
I suspect that number two is that those who do them don't publish them. We do. So we're prepared to be open about that too. And there's no doubt, as you said, over the last 3 or 4 years, our organisation has gone through quite a lot of trauma. We're losing money, £600 million. We've lost, which is a euphemism, we have got rid of 3,500 police staff jobs. We are reconfiguring and challenging, frankly, some bad old things, as well as encouraging some good old things. So there's no doubt at the moment there are challenges, and the normal challenges in police in London. And that survey, we prefer it was far higher in support, but I'm confident that people we've got have got some great leadership. We're having to take some difficult decisions, and I believe as those good decisions work their way through, and this may be one of them, if we're shown the public that we're doing a good job, that we get more public support, not less.
Is it based, do you think, on wins, or is it based on cuts? Is that where you think the
There's certainly some of that
is?
in it, but I think that'd be a bit defensive of me to say that, wouldn't it? You asked me, well, what are you doing about leadership? And I said, well, it's not my fault. It's down to Mr. Windsor. It's down to cuts. There's no doubt that's playing a part. Police officers are...
So you take responsibility for your officers being unhappy?
Yeah, I've got to. I'm their leader, and I do my best, together with my team, to try and get a positive future. And I think we have got a positive future. We've seen over these last 3 years, we have cut £600 million. Our police officer numbers dropped for 2 of those years. But here we are today, the only police force in the country who is back to our policing numbers of 32,000. We took 15% of the grant out, or 15% of the grant was taken away from us, and we made savings in the back office, and we've got our police numbers back. 42 forces cut their police numbers. I think that's a great achievement. But of course, that meant 3,500 people didn't have a job. People who worked in our admin, people who worked in personnel. That's meant an awful lot of trauma for all those people. So that's my responsibility.
But there's more cuts to come.
There are, and it's going to be more challenging. But I keep saying nobody will follow a pessimist. So if the leader of your organisation walked in and said, I don't know what I'm going to do, it's going to be really hard, I think you get a bit fed up.
But if you're, what is it, over 32,000 police officers, will that number be the same in 5 years?
Well, we don't know exactly how much money we'll lose. We'll find out by Christmas. We expect it'll be something of the order of a further £800 million. So if you add the 600 with the 800 I've just mentioned, the total is 1.4 billion, which is about a third of our budget. Now, we've maintained our police numbers so far, and all we've said at the moment is when we see the size of the task, we'll start talking about numbers, but it probably will be less.
We had an email from Gemma in Luton. He says, how can Sir Bernard guarantee the safety of Londoners with huge cuts to come and clearly less police officers? I mean, there is a suspicion that you've managed to go for backroom staff in those cuts at the moment, but if you're looking at saving even more money, 800 million, then that's going to have to include frontline officers.
Yeah, well, we've said, clearly said, there will be less. We're just not being precise yet because we don't know how many less. I believe we'll be okay. We've got a great organisation. It's a fantastic city. It's a big city. And we will always need big numbers. And I'm confident with the right political support, with the right leadership, even with less officers, we'll still be able to get through this. We're going to have to invest more as well in technology. And because we've been selling some of our buildings, we can do that. Now, there are times when you have to have police officer numbers. Sometimes we have big events where we put thousands of officers on the street. We put sometimes, for example, Notting Hill, we put about 6,500, 7,000 officers on the streets. That's bigger than nearly every police force in this country. These are big numbers. Now, we've got the trooping on Saturday. We'll put another 1,500, 2,000 officers out then. So we always in this city will need very big numbers.
Could you police London with 25,000 police officers?
Well, we did probably 15 years ago.
Could you do that today?
It's different today. I don't think we'll get anywhere near that. I think, we'll land less than 32,000, but we're not going to be precise. I know, Ian, you'll try all night to persuade me to give you a number. And I'm only being imprecise.
But you must have done the figures yourself. You must have laid in bed and thought, my goodness, this falls to me to try and sort this one out. Well, there must be a sort of loose on the back of a fag packet calculation you've done.
The two big pieces of advice I can give is, one is, clearly there will be less police. And number two is, I reassure the people of London that we will still be safe at the end of that. We've got a few things in our back pocket where we think we can sensibly make savings. We've probably accounted at the moment for probably about 40% of the savings we need to make next without cutting the front line. And our priority, together with this mayor and whatever happens after the next mayor election, will be to keep people safe and keep as many officers as we can on the front line.
Is it the kind of job, though, that whatever you're given to work with, you will make work?
Yes. give me double the number of officers, give me 64,000, and I'll do an even better job. We always want more police. I think the public want more police. The harsh reality is that if we want more police, we're going to have to pay. And at the moment, it looks like the whole of government is struggling to pay for everything we need in public service.
How do individuals work alongside the police? I mean, it is there is a synergy between the police and the public, and perhaps we don't look at that enough. What should we be doing, either as Londoners or punters, customers? I think you even call us. What is our role in fighting crime? How do we become more vigilant, more helpful to you?
Well, I think if people have seen the programme tonight, you'll have seen at least a couple of occasions when people have helped the public. The public do help the police, rather. So they will ring us when there's a problem. I think you see one gentleman who points out where there is a, if there's, I think they're talking about the Brixton Splash and how the community might help to police and steward that better. And in fact, it worked out pretty well. The police did their bit, the community did their bit. So working together, that is a great combination. We know that to solve crime, there's only 3 ways to solve crime. You either catch them doing it, and if we turn up quickly, we do, and we do a lot every night. We use forensics, or someone tells us who did it. And people say, oh, well, criminals never tell you, the public never tells you. How do we think you got 88,000 people in prison? It's usually because members of the public know who committed a crime and tell us. And often criminals tell us about other criminals. It works. And the way that works is that people trust their police. I mean, the Met, together with the rest of the UK, has got one fantastic thing that you don't see in many countries of this world, which is we don't carry firearms. And there's a reason for that. It means that people trust us. They think we're acting reasonably and professionally, and they want to help us to make sure that we can police London in a good way. Even with 32,000 police, we cannot impose our will on 8.6 million. We need to work with the public. That's what that means, policing by consent.
Again, there is, and I know that it's kind of always been there, there's that stereotype, you call the police, they don't turn up, and when they do turn up, they don't do anything, and it's not what, and people do, some maybe cynically, maybe some correctly, do have that view. How do you begin that process of healing that relationship? Because there is there's a chasm sometimes.
If it was true, Ian, I'd agree. But I think you'll find people are fair. I mean, we get about 4.5 million telephone calls a year. Huge number of calls. This time of night, we do get a surge. We've got the best call handling of the country. So we answer all our 999s on average in about 5 seconds. Our 101s, 9 seconds. This is a massive operation. We answer that phone quickly. And then we've got to get there. And 90% of the time, we achieve our emergency our emergency response, which is within 15 minutes. And then I think it's at the moment it's running at 89% within 1 hour. These are incredible achievements. So on the whole, we do turn up when we say we're going to turn up. We do answer the phone. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I think British policing wasn't very good at either of those. But in both of the forces I've led, we've been excellent, because you've got to answer the phone when people need help to find out what help they need, and you've got to get there if it's an emergency. They are challenging times, and there are challenges to getting the police in there. And if we weren't very good, how come that we're arresting 240,000 people a year?
But often it's the follow-up that some people have a concern with.
I'd always
maybe the police do turn up, but the follow-up afterwards isn't quite what some people expect.
I think what would be interesting, I've had the privilege of seeing the 5 programmes that have been broadcast tonight and the other 4. And I think you'll see some really good follow-up. You'll see very serious offences, murder. You'll see some less serious but important offences investigated, where there are some positive outcomes. You see at least 2 operations tonight, firearms operations. In one case where a neighbour is complaining about an older man who's threatened her with a gun. Officers go in and resolve that quickly. You see another one where we used to see fighting in the street. Firearms officers turn up, make the arrest, find the weapons and do something about it. I think tonight you've seen, going back to the Brixton Urban Splash, officers made arrests before the event, they made arrests during the event, and compared to previous years, where there have been serious violence, in fact 2 attempt murders, we've not seen that this year. So I think what you see is some very able people doing their best, sometimes failing, because we have one great problem, we employ human beings. And they say you can never remove more than 3% human error. And we do deal with a lot of things. We occasionally have a lazy officer, we occasionally have a poor one. Every profession has it. But I hope what these programmes will show is 90% of the people I lead, good people, trying hard to get it right, and just human beings with all their foibles, but quite funny, very interested in the job, and occasionally, sincerely wanting to do the best for the public of London.
We will take a call from one of those officers in just a few moments' time. 0345 6060 973. Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe is with us. He's the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. More of your calls coming up on LBC next.
Late Nights with Ian Collins on LBC.
People travel from kilometres around to 269 Ballards Lane, home of the Curtain Factory outlet. We would have said miles around, but all of our designer name curtain and upholstery fabric is sold by the metre. Millions of them, and all at rock bottom trade prices. Thousands of people have already found the perfect designer fabric for less, and you can too, at the Curtain Factory outlet. Visit our warehouse, open 7 days a week at 269 Ballards Lane, North Finchley, or click curtainfactoryoutlet.co.uk.
In an ideal world, when someone buys your business, they offer the price you want, pay in cash, and you walk off into the sunset. Unfortunately, it's rarely like this. There are various ways in which a sale might take place, but Barnes Rofe will make sure it's done in the best way to suit you, at the best price possible. And you may even only pay capital gains tax at 10%.
If you're thinking of selling, have a chat with Barnes Rofe, those clever accountants for business. Visit barnesrofe.com/radio.
I guess everyone will have their own reason for doing Shine, Cancer Research UK's nighttime walking marathon on Saturday the 26th of September. Maybe to see London in a new light, or for the joy of walking across the finish line. Me? I'm doing it to celebrate my amazing mum getting the cancer all clear. So I want to shout it to everyone from the rooftops. Stop sleep! Beating cancer can't wait! Sign up now at shinewalk.org. Event rules and entry fee apply.
The countdown is on.
5!
TalkTalk's incredible free broadband offer ends on Thursday the 18th of June.
4!
Totally unlimited broadband, free for a whole year, with 1670 line rental.
3!
That's up to £179 less than BT, which means you'll be saving money well into next summer.
2!
So don't miss out on free broadband for an entire year. Search TalkTalk offers and join by Thursday the 18th of June. Do it now because you're running out of time.
1!
TalkTalk, a brighter home for everyone. 18-month contract and conditions apply. Price after promo £5.
You took a risk and asked her to dance. You took the plunge and asked her to marry you. Life isn't about whether you take a risk, but whether the risk is worth the reward. Rate setters reap the rewards by cutting out the middleman to get a better return. Your capital is at risk, but then earning nothing is not an option, especially when it comes to investing your money. Search RateSetter and make today pay. RateSetter is authorized and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority.
Ian Collins on LBC.
It is LBC leading Britain's conversation. Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe is with us. He's the top cop of, well, in fact, they often called Sir Bernard the UK's top police officer. I guess that's because the Met is the biggest force. It's also the busiest.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, it's we're probably at least 3 times the size of any other police force from Birmingham and Manchester. And of course, London is a great capital. I mean, London, people forget sometimes, is 4 times the size of Paris, 3 times the size of Rome, and growing at pace.
So one of the biggest in Europe, probably.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, some countries have a national police force. So the Dutch have just gone to a national police force. So you do occasionally get bigger police forces. But this city, I mean, 25% of population growth of the United Kingdom came here over the last 10 years. This is a fantastic city and growing at pace. Let's
take some calls. This is Robert in Battersea. Robert, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. You're a serving police officer. You're through to Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe.
Good evening, sir.
Good morning, evening, Robert.
I'm just finished watching today's episode and just wanted to touch on a topic that was obviously quite prevalent in it and something that's been on my mind as a serving white officer. You're wanting to bring in 50-50 recruitment. You've stopped recruiting from outside the Met. And also quite a troubling headline I saw that's coming up in the Times tomorrow is that you said you want to disincentivize older serving white officers to help recruit more officers that resemble the London force. Where does that put officers like me to sort of positive discrimination within our own force?
Well, first of all, Robert, thanks for the opportunity to address this, because what happened was on Friday we had a pre-look at, with the press of the programme that went out tonight. And one of the journalists said to me, can you learn, you the Met, can you learn from other areas of the world? For example, Northern Ireland, in terms of how you mix in with society. Because, of course, in Northern Ireland, they'd got an IUC that was believed to be separate from society. Mm-hmm. I said, well, there are three things that we can learn from them. One is this 50-50 rule. The second is they'd had external recruitment, so a private company recruited police officers. And the third was enhanced retirement. Now, my argument about 50-50 is, well, first of all, if we don't do something radical, the Met will continue looking as we are, which is not representative of London for the next 20, 30 years, because we only turn over about 5% a year. Yeah. So if we only rely on normal recruitment, we will not change. And if people say that doesn't matter, fine. I think it does. I think we need to represent London better.
Now,
let me just finish, Robert, because it is really important. I'll, of course, listen to whatever you want to say. So the first point was, people often misunderstand 50-50. What 50-50 means is you select people by their talent. So it's same standard. So say you as a black or white officer go into the recruitment pool in exactly the same way. It's all to do with talent. You come out of the pool, you take up your employment according to your proportion in society. So in Northern Ireland, it may have been the Catholic came out in 2 months, whereas a unionist came out in 18 months. So the same opportunity, but it took slower. And over time, and it only lasted 10 years, they got better representation. The second point about who selects, they got, I think it was Deloitte, I may be wrong, they selected new police officers for the new world. When I was in the inspectorate, I talked to the sergeants in the PSNI, and they were very happy with what the people were getting. And the final thing, and this is what worries me and what the point I'm making that I think you're particularly making, is that if we don't recruit many in the future years, because we've already talked about we'll have less money, so our recruitment will go down to a trickle of about 600 a year, just straightforward turnover, then our chances of changing are very, very limited. And if we don't do anything, then that will mean that we just don't change. If we're not recruiting differently, and what Northern Ireland also did was for them, the Protestant unionist older officer, they paid them to retire earlier. Now, that's the only point I made. If somebody wanted to do that, that's in the government's gift. I didn't propose it, but it was in that context I explained it. But sorry, you were trying to say something.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate that. Obviously, time's running out in a sense that for us to be able to change with these budget cuts, and I do fully agree that we do need to be more representative of the community that we are policing. I just feel that for the current white officers in the force that you have, it's a little bit disconcerting how we're going about this, and I do feel it is bordering on positive discrimination. There are courses for those who are going for promotion specifically for BME officers. There are courses specifically for BME officers for most things to help them get to those positions. But why does it have to be specified in that way? Why can it not be organically come about? And in terms of recruiting from, for example, Brixton, Tottenham, somewhere like that, where there's a high majority of BME officers, BME persons, why do we have to strive so much to get them? It's going to be very difficult for a Joe Public in that sort of area to turn around to their family, their colleagues, and say, you know what, I want to be a police officer, especially with the stigma that's attached to that. So we're not going to get those kind of people joining the Met because it's not in their interest. It's not going to help them socially.
But Robert, the reality is that we don't have problem attracting people from minorities. So when we've had, this 3,500 officers we've taken over the last 18 months, about 1 in 3 of the candidates who came forward was from minorities. Now, not all of them were of the standard that we want to take, so we ended up with about 1 in 5 were from minorities. But as you just explained, what we've done over the last 6 months is to introduce a London residency test. So what we've said is that people need to have lived in London for 3 of the last 5 years. That's for 2 reasons. The principal one is we want people to understand London. But the problem, particularly at the moment, is when the Met opens its doors to recruitment, the rest of the country pours through. Mm-hmm. Now, as you know, and I don't know where you're from, I'm from Sheffield originally. I'm not a Londoner by birth. I can't hardly say that you have to be a Londoner all the time. Yeah. But when that happens, the rest of the population of the UK doesn't look at all like London or feel like London when we've got minorities at 40% of the population. Now, the trouble is when Cumbrians apply and when Scots apply, they overwhelm the good minority candidates in the capital. So it's trying to do something. And your point about, I quite completely understand about providing extra support, which is legal to minorities and those who've in the past been disadvantaged. Despite that, we're still not seeing promotions happen as fast as I would like. And the problem I've got, as I stand in front of public meetings in Lambeth, in Hackney, and around the whole city, people say, well, you still all look like white guys to me. If we are going to convince them... No, but if we... Well, actually, my point is that it is legally possible to help people, give them extra help. That's what the law says. And we can wait another 50 years, and we could end up with another 50 years of frustration. So I think we're agreeing we need to be more representative. There's always a debate about how we get there.
But are you confident, Sir Bernard, that you could, as Robert alluded to there, you could recruit from places like Tottenham, like Hackney?
Well, we are doing. Yeah, what we're showing is that...
But at the right percentage that you suggest requires to reflect what London looks like.
In the original pool, as I say, people who come forward, about 1 in 3 are from minorities. It drifts down as we work our way through that pool to about 1 in 5. And it shows that people are at least interested in becoming Metropolitan Police officers. Minorities want to be in the police. So I think we can do it. We've got an interest out there. My biggest challenge at the moment is not having the money to recruit in future years. And people still saying, well, what if you're only 14% next year? I mean, I think if we could get to about 20% of the Met police officers were from minorities, that would be a great step forward. It's going to cause some tension along the way, I realise that. But I think where we're agreeing is we need to represent society that we please.
So it is a form of positive discrimination?
Well, I'm not saying it's
even if you don't like that term, but it does clearly.
I'm not going to get into
ticks that box, doesn't
because in 2 seconds I'm not going to explain all that. What I think is vitally important is in a police force, a police service, you've got to represent the community of police, and for us that means a very diverse group of people. I mean, of the people we arrest every year, about 28% are foreign national offenders. Broadly, that's what London is. You need an insight into. I mean, we've got 250,000 French people. I think about 130,000 Polish people. We've got all sorts of nationalities and religions. You need some insight into this great city.
Mustafa is in Bow. Mustafa, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. You're through to the Commissioner.
Hi. My question to the Commissioner would be around the differences between different groups' experiences within let's say, charging decisions or for similar offence or the exact same offence. So let's take possession of cannabis or something along that lines, which I know there's starting to be cannabis warnings. But my question is around unconscious bias and raising awareness of unconscious bias. So you've alluded to already that officers are humans, so they're products of the experiences and society. But how do you raise awareness of unconscious bias and trying to smooth out the differences between different groups' experiences whilst in police custody, but also through working with the CPS in terms of charging decisions, so that two people who've probably committed that same offence don't have significantly different experiences, or one person may get charged, another person may get charged.
I got a point, Mustafa.
Okay.
So, Mustafa, first of all, we've been training our officers over the last two years about exactly this point, about unconscious bias, because for those who are listening who may not understand, we all have some bias or prejudice. The difficulty is spotting it. So there's something in that in all of us. And we have been training our officers, particularly around, for example, stop search, to try and help them understand, as well all of us understand, that it can have an impact on your decision-making, and you've got to really be aware of it and check yourself before you do something inappropriate. So we have done our best to help people deal with this. Not easy, because the very fact it's unconscious means it's very difficult to both know about and do something about. But we are sensitising our officers to that. In terms of Crown Prosecution Service charging decisions, I can't really, as you might accept, comment on that. But I do know that that's something they do the best to do something about. But that disproportionality, which is what you're discussing, is seen throughout the system, from arrest to charge to prison, etc. So the police
is it real, or is it a perception, do you think?
There is certainly some reality to it. So what exactly explains that? I'm no sociologist, but what we see is a disproportionality in employment, in things like healthcare, in things like police action. It's not solely the police. My responsibility is obviously about police action.
We had an email from many others on this as well, watching Sir Bernard's comments on the issue of Met and racism, which is the issue we're touching on here. It strikes me, says Paul, that the Commissioner is still dodging the question of whether the Met has learned anything over 2 decades after the murder of Stephen Lawrence. This is reference to the institutional racism that I think he felt you avoided giving the Met that tag on the programme this evening.
Yeah, and I'm not going to do it. I've said very clearly I'm prepared to accept the judgment of other people. For what do I add? If I was to say no, I don't think we are, everybody would race to the barriers and say, well, who are you to say that? How can you possibly know? If I say yes, that's
But isn't that what people want from a commissioner?
Yeah, let me just finish. My only other alternative there is to say yes. So I'm not prepared to get involved in that game. Journalists do this all the time. I'm quite sincere in my belief that if other people judge us in that way, we have to accept that label. I would challenge how many of the callers who make that claim, how many of the journalists sometimes, understand what it means. I don't think they do.
But of course it was Macpherson that first made that claim.
But my point is, who's understood it 30 years afterwards?
And we are still here 30 years later almost, still discussing that issue of institutionalised racism within the Met.
And I've said two things. One, I accept there is some evidence for it. We've talked already about our makeup in terms of police officers. Are we representative? We're not. I've made some radical proposals. We've already heard somebody who doesn't agree with me. There are lots more who don't agree, but they haven't got a better idea. I've at least got some ideas. My challenge to those who want to see change is, what are your ideas? And then secondly is that if we are unrepresentative, if that we are, as Mustafa has said, sometimes we have unconscious bias, what part of society thinks that is better?
Let's take another call. Karen is in Lewisham. Karen, hello.
Hello there, thank
Hi,
you.
You're through to the Commissioner.
I'd like to ask the Commissioner what he's going to do about his complaint system, which is failing the public and failing victims of crime. Police officers are basically lying, leaving people to suffer incidents for years, and they're just getting away with it because your complaint system is just not fit for purpose.
Well, Karen, it's difficult without knowing the exact details. The system does take too long. The two pieces of reassurance I would offer you is, of course, there's the Independent Police Complaints Commission who regulate this system. If you're not happy, then you should use that. You've got your MP who you can talk to. The biggest hope I would suggest in the future is the body-worn video our officers will be wearing all the time will show what they're doing and how they're doing it. I think that's going to be a really good thing to, first of all, help officers become more professional and accountable, and secondly, allow members of the public to refer back to that to see whether or not what they say happened did happen. And frankly, sometimes it captures the very bad behaviour of the suspects that we arrest, who in court allege that their behaviour had nothing to do with the reason they were arrested.
But you see, the problem is that officers just lie, and your complaint system is complicit in covering up complaints.
But Karen, we've got 32,000 police officers. To say that they all lie, to say that they all lie, just unfair. I think if you talk about a particular incident, of course I can't talk about that now, but I reject the fact they all lie, so I don't think that's right.
Karen, thank you for that, and I'm sure, like many of these issues, we could talk in detail about specific cases. There is an investigation we've been carrying out here on LBC. This just kind of chime with the point that Karen was making there. Our senior reporter, Tom Swarbrick, has been investigating the unsolved killing of 8-year-old Vishal Mehrotra. For those who don't know, Vishal went missing in 1981. It was the day of Charles and Diana's royal wedding. His body was found 9 months later, buried in a shallow grave, missing his legs and lower spine. 33 years later, nobody knows who has taken him. His father believes his son was taken by people linked to a VIP paedophile ring, and the police knew this but covered it up. What is clear, though, is that between the Met, who originally dealt with the disappearance, and Sussex Police, who subsequently dealt with the investigation, there are all manner of unanswered questions and allegations of negligence from the police. His father would clearly like the case reopened. As a result of the LBC investigation, the MP Zach Goldsmith has written to the Home Secretary asking if the case can be reopened. It hardly gets more serious, Sir Bernard, than this. Would you be able to give Vishal's family some kind of reassurance that you would look at this case, do your best to right some wrongs here, and maybe even reopen the case?
Well, first of all, my extreme sympathies to the family. This was in 1981, I believe, that this case happened. This poor boy died, a 9-year-old boy, and that for any family is awful. So I can't imagine what they've gone through over the last tens of years. That's a terrible, terrible thing. And now, of course, they're still waiting to know what happened to him and who committed that murder. The position at the moment is that the Independent Police Complaints Commission are looking at how the Met in 1981 dealt with the missing from home inquiry that was first generated. And I believe that Sussex Police have already reviewed their murder inquiry, and they're very happy to deal with any new information, and of course we will work with them. But at the moment it remains their murder investigation, so I'm afraid I, as Commissioner in the Met, have, as we said right at the beginning, a big police force and a lot of responsibility, but it's not for me to tell Sussex Police what to do. But we're very happy to work with them, if there is any new information, I'm sure they would be eager to investigate it.
Are you aware? I mean, this happened at the same time as the notorious paedophile Sidney Cook was carrying out his crimes against children of a very similar age. To your knowledge, have any of your officers been to Wakefield Prison to interview Mr. Cook about this?
Well, Ian, what I can't do, you probably accept, I came in to talk about the broadcast tonight. It's rather difficult for me then to answer detailed questions about any particular inquiry, and I won't do that. But what I quite have to do is, if there's any new information, of course we will listen to it. I'm sure Sussex will. And if there's any link between any Metropolitan Police murder investigation and any other type of inquiry we have, and anything in Sussex, of course we'll work on that immediately.
A lot of calls and emails as well about arming the police. Just a few final points on this, Sir Bernard. This, of course, was featured heavily in the programme about armed police. There are armed units, of course, within the Met, as there are in other forces. But as I think you mentioned earlier, we have a proud history of being a largely unarmed police force. Steve White, the head of the Police Federation, said recently that every frontline police officer should be offered a taser. What are your thoughts on that?
I think he's wrong. We extended the use of taser here about 2.5, 3 years ago. We did it because we had a horrible incident in Harrow where officers didn't get sported tasers quickly. So on each of our boroughs now we have 2 vehicles which are equipped with taser. Plus we've got specialist firearms units that have taser too. We don't think it's needed. Every new taser, we've got to buy them, we've got to train officers. So I think at the moment we've got the balance about right. And if I wanted to extend it further, which is an operational decision, I'd want to show more clear evidence that we needed it. At the moment, I don't think that's the case.
Why could you not offer it? You could offer and not necessarily officers have to accept.
We don't run a democracy. We run a police force. And that's a big decision. And it's one that I would take responsibility for in the future, as we have done up to now. So it's not, would you like to take one out? First of all, if they're going to take the out, they've got to be trained. That needs an ongoing review of training. We've got to buy the kit. We've got to replace the kit. So that's the very practical side of it. And at the moment, we honestly don't think that we can see the need. But my officers will know that when 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now, I saw that some officers had been let down in terms of, I thought, how quickly we responded with taser, then of course we rolled more out. And if we see the need in future, I promise that that's what we'll do. But at the moment, I honestly don't see that. Some people do think it, and Steve White represents it, but he's not talking for the Metropolitan Police. He's a union rep, and he's got his job to do.
Final point, which touches on the issue that we were just alluding to there. There has been an awful lot of headlines about child sex abuse and organised paedophile rings, and that the Metropolitan Police haven't investigated over a long period of time. Tomorrow's front page in the Daily Mail reports detectives have launched a new investigation into allegations that Labour peer Lord Janner sexually abused teenage boys. When we talk about this, whenever we do phone-ins, there is, again, that sniff that the police are either in cahoots with somebody, covering something up, not investigating properly, or ignoring what is clear evidence. Where is that investigation? How far are we down the line in looking at what appears to be a sort of an overarching story here that encompasses politics and VIP areas of life?
In terms of Lord Janner, that's an inquiry being carried out by another police force, and I wouldn't get involved in a particular inquiry anyway. We have invested an awful lot more resources into 2 things: historic investigations of child sexual abuse and historic of claims of rape. That's taken a lot of resources. So we today are putting as many resources as we can into investigating these historical allegations. It's not straightforward, because remember where we started this interview, we've got less resources, not more, and as well as coping with what we're dealing with now, from the new pressure around terrorism, cybercrime and sexual offences. Part of that, the rise in sexual offence reporting, is around these historical offences. So we're putting resources into it. These claims, will be looked at by the Goddard inquiry. It's expected that will take years to come to fruition, or certainly come to conclusions. I suspect we all want to know what Lord Justice Goddard will discover. We don't yet. All I can do is that where we get allegations, we'll take them seriously. One thing I have said is that we'll have to prioritise. If we have an attack tonight, we'll have to investigate that immediately. It may be that some of the historical claims will take a little longer, but we will take them seriously and we will investigate.
We have 20 seconds. A very quick call from Kate in Westminster. Kate, you watched the documentary last night. You've got a question for Sir Bernard.
I did watch the documentary. Good evening, sir. I just wanted to ask, Hi, I just wanted to ask, with morale sort of seemingly quite low across the Met, I just wanted to ask what you're able to do or what you do in order to sort of boost it amongst your officers. And just to give one very quick, just a sentence as an example, I emailed your office a year ago just to comment on an officer that I felt had gone sort of above and beyond his sort of duties. And the email was just forwarded on to him. And there was no sort of comment from your office, if you will, just congratulating him. So I just thought that would have been an example of where I don't want thanking particularly, but he could have been thanked.
Okay, I found that amazing.
I just wondered what you do.
Well, I'm trying to explain. I find that amazing because over the last 3.5 years, I must have written every week. I write probably about 20, 30 letters or emails to officers which passes on good wishes like yours. It passes on the email or the letter, and it passes my good wishes to the officer for what they've done and points it out to their line manager. So all the people who've received them can point that out. If for some reason your email has missed the system, I promise you, if you send it to me tomorrow, it'll get put right. Because I feel very strongly that one of the things I've always found really rewarding in the long career I've had is when a member of the public takes the time to say thank you with the detail of why it meant something to them. It always makes your day. So I've always felt very strongly you pass that on. So if we let you down and the officer down, then I'll put it right tomorrow.
Kate, thank you very much indeed for that. We are out of time. Sir Bernard Hogan, you are going to come back and see us, I'm sure.
Yes, if you invite me in, I'll be happy to come.
We would love to see you again.
It's a bit late at night, but we're prepared to do that, of course. Well, we did the early morning one, so we ought to be fair.
You're a police officer, you know what the late shift is like.
I'm only joking. I mean, I've worked shifts for quite a long time, not recently, I admit.
Yeah. Do you know what the police caution is now, by the way?
I do. I brought it here especially, and because
you were required in episode 1 of the Met, you did actually make an arrest yourself, the first at this rank, I think you said.
I did.
Did you get the caution correct?
I got it wrong. So on the broadcast, it was wrong. The suspect complained about the broadcaster filming him, so we had to stop filming. I realised I got it wrong, so I then gave it him properly. Do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, read it out. I'd like to
If
hear
anybody
this.
understands this after I've read it out, they can ring in. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. I think it had been 7 years since I'd last given it. People may understand why I got a few words wrong. But that's the caution, which I gave him afterwards. Our officers do it every day.
I thought you were about to whip out your handcuffs when you gave that as well. Which is
as far as I'm aware, you're not doing anything
really.
wrong, so we shall avoid that.
Good work. Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe, thank you, sir.
Thanks for your interest, and thanks very much to your callers who've called tonight.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
This is LBC. We're going to take some news now. The time is 11:15. With the latest headlines, Chaz Rowe.
The Commissioner of the Met Police has told LBC he takes responsibility